whether that's a program that has small business goals only, contract goals that you have approved and ready to go. You're certifying small businesses, or if that's going to be DBE contract goals with a new definition of what a DBE is, or a combination of both, or other program elements. But this has an end goal in mind, and it's not just the reevaluation. It's not just submitting a new overall DBE goal. It's getting back to operating a program that is important to remedying the effects of disadvantage for a large group of businesses across the country. Okay, we showed you this slide as well, but just reminder, the reevaluation is DBEs in your home state, and then there's a different process for looking at the interstate applications, not that different than what you had before. And this is an opportunity for currently certified DBEs and ACDBEs. We mean that whenever we say DBE in the home state to recertify. So when we're talking about how's it going, we're going to be talking about the recertification and reevaluation of DBEs in a home state, but it also has implications for those DBEs then to be able to participate in programs in operation in other states. All right, success and challenges in recertification. And here's what we can report. And we've divided this into parts. The first one is, so have FHWA, FTA, or your FAA counterparts been talking to you, been helpful, guiding you along the way? And the answer is radio silence is what we've been mostly hearing. There has been a couple exceptions to that, and saying, hey, if you did this, I think you can do that. And that's over the phone and never in writing. So if anybody on this call has anything in writing from FHWA, FTA, or FAA that would be helpful beyond the IFR, please put that note in the Q&A, because we really want to hear more about that and be able to report. And it's something that somebody in one state can be able to tell another state, hey, we're hearing this. Can we, I mean, if in your state, you could be able to talk to your counterparts and say, these other folks in another part of the country are hearing this from their USDOT counterparts. What do you think about that? And it's maybe open the door a little bit, but it's really been difficult, and about the complete lack of communication. Where are people in the recertification process? So we may have to edit the Caltrans one, because that's a bit confusing. We thought when we put the slide together that was true, and if there's anybody from Caltrans here today, you can clarify that. But Hawaii DOT is one that's not yet started. That's one example of who's not started. Caltrans is either about ready to start or has. Most states have started, and many started in 2025. So they're well underway. There may be examples other than Oregon, but I think Oregon is one example of they've closed the window for recertification. They're still taking new applications for certification, but they are right on the cusp, or have formally given notice that their reevaluation process is complete. Oregon is a one certifier entity state, so they were advantaged by that. And Caltrans, I think, has the most certifiers of any state in the country, and that may be part of the answer, that it's harder when you have a lot of entities to get certifying in the same way, to get that process started. So the IFR happened to everybody at the same time, October 3rd. We have very, very different results in terms of how far, or whether you've even started on the recertification around the country. And that's, I'd say the common theme when we talk to people is, oh, we expect to be done with this this summer sometime, with not wanting to give a specific date because you don't know how long it's going to take people to get their applications in, for you to review them, and then be able to find some things that need adjustment or further information or fixing in them. Curing is the technical term. And then they have to take some time and do that, get it back to you. And you don't know how far out in time you need to give people to even start certifying or recertifying. So, in many of the entities that had a date, they hopefully didn't use the word deadline because you're not supposed to, but had some kind of date for getting an application in, they've had to extend those. So that is what we are finding around the country. Most are muddling through this, but have started. So we're really interested in the Q&A to tell us more about what's going on in your state or anything that's unusual. This has not been helped, and we have another slide on this, by if you're a certifier in a state where the state DOT is having nothing to do with the program. And they say, we don't want to do this. We're not going to certify. We're all about small businesses or all about something else. And basically ignoring the requirements in the IFR that pertain to remolding the program for socially and economically disadvantaged business owners. And so working around that when you had a major player not being part of the program, literally. And Florida, I believe, is one example of that. So we're interested in if anything has changed there. Alabama, I hear is that as well. There may be other states that have notified USDOT that they do not intend to comply and they want to do something else. Okay, another big difference among states is the mention of race and gender in the personal narrative. And I want to point this out. We've been talking about this for months now. Um, and I wanted to kick this to Mara to give her perspective on it. But just stating the facts, some states allow the owner to mention race and gender. And now they may be basing the decision on other factors, but just in writing it, you are allowed to say who you are or mention your race or gender in your personal narrative, perhaps as background or just in the process of telling a story. You can't really tell the story without using that information. Some states do not allow the mention of race or gender in the personal narrative. You can't say, oh, I'm a woman of color. If you say that, then it's sent back for revision. And then we have heard that some states are not, or some certifiers are not allowing the use of any gendered words like mother or wife. Mara, would you like to comment on this?
Thank you, Dave. So yes, the way that I've read, and I think most practitioners in this field would read the personal narrative requirements, is to discuss your lived experience. And in my view, you cannot divorce who you are, whether it's your race, ethnicity, nationality, childhood experience, economic experience, etc., from your story. I mean, sometimes it may not need to be mentioned, but that's the individual's decision. But my sense of this is that this personal narrative requirement is drawn from the Harvard case that the U.S. Supreme Court decided in 2023. And there, as folks will remember, the court did allow students to describe their experiences when submitting their personal statements for consideration for admission, and did not rule out the mention of race or how race factored, because the issue there was race, not gender, but I think by extension, obviously we can extend it to race and other factors, that they could mention the experience they had and how race or their racial experience played into their lived experience. So my sense of this is that any certifier who's reading the IFR as disallowing mention of race or gender is reviewing it too strictly. too strictly, and I don't read anything in the IFR that says that you can't mention race. What I read is that the decisions on certification cannot be based on race and gender. And why is that? The presumption in favor of race and gender in the prior program is what this government, this administration, because it has not have a final ruling in the courts, has concluded that it's unconstitutional. So you just kind of, as a practitioner, I follow the theme here. So I think it's too strict, and certainly eliminating references to mother. I mean, frankly, I'm shocked. I'm not I'm not exaggerating this. Mother, that's definitely a description, and how far does that go? For instance, can one mention one's mother as a single parent, for instance? I mean, it's just frankly ridiculous, that anyone would think that the word mother or father would somehow be prohibited. What I keep saying in these seminars, and what I believe is what the government is trying to do, assuming one can follow clearly what the thinking is here, is that the prior program, in their view, was unconstitutional. So this is a race neutral approach. The IFR is a race neutral approach that is the first level of judicial scrutiny when dealing with the strict scrutiny standard. Strict scrutiny, if you recall, is a standard that is applied by the courts when evaluating classifications based on race. So here they're trying to, in my view, present a race neutral program and see how it plays out, and whether that addresses the disadvantagedness that Congress has said exists. So again, referencing one's lived experience, including whether one is a parent or one has a racial experience that's important to communicate, I think is acceptable. That's my opinion, and that's the opinion that I provide my clients.
Thank you. Again, can you use the Q&A, ask a lot of questions, and hopefully, Nikki, you're monitoring that. Jump in if you find anything that we need to just stop and address right away. Another thing that was it's a technicality, but it turns out to be very important, is whether applications could be thumbs up or thumbs down, and then that's it, based on the initial application. That's the way the IFR allows, I believe, allows the certifiers to proceed in the reevaluation process. There was nothing in the IFR that would disallow the ability to cure applications, to give feedback instead of an immediate denial. And that seems to be the case around the country in general. If you get an application that does not appear to be complying with the IFR instructions, you can give that feedback and ask for a resubmission of that application without having to deny it. Now, we have heard that some certifiers are doing that with some instruction and some help, and some are not. And so that's something to, we would urge as much as legally possible to give some feedback along with the informal rejection, not a formal denial, but hey, we need more information, or can you resubmit it with not doing that, or can you answer this type of question in more detail? Mara, you have anything to add here?
No.
Okay.
We do have a couple of questions in the Q&A that were relevant to what you all were just discussing. So let me read out these three, and then we can keep it moving. So first, has there been a better definition on what DBE conscious and DBE neutral is? Definitions in IFR are very vague.
I'll take a crack at that. So just like race conscious or race neutral were these almost terms of art back prior to October 3rd, DBE conscious means we're going to apply we're going to reserve a part of our program for certified DBEs, those disadvantaged business enterprises. So a DBE conscious remedy would be a DBE contract goal. A DBE neutral remedy, similar to the race and gender neutral remedy, would be, oh, we're going to do a small business program, or we're going to do greater outreach and education of all firms that are not restricted to a particular group, such as DBEs. Mara, did I do that okay?
Yes, you did. The focus of the IFR is on disadvantage, um, socially and economic disadvantage, as we've discussed. So when the reference, as I'm reading it, the reference to DBE conscious, that's where the disadvantage conversation comes in. So then the question, of course, it's a good one, like, well, what constitutes that disadvantage? And the guidelines, if you will, that we've been provided with are what essentially comes, what you can address as an individual seeking certification in your personal narrative. So essentially, it covers disadvantage experiences in education and business and employment and financing and frankly any other area of one's experience because it's not limited to those categories. So unfortunately, it's kind of like a general response to a very specific question. But that's the best.
Nikki, what else you got?
Thank you. What is the timeline that's being used for curative measures, i.e., 2 weeks, 5 days, 3 days, etc.?
That's a really good question, and if others can give their what they're doing in their states in the Q&A, that would be helpful. Um, we are actually recommending that that be done. I think in some cases that it's not, that they're because of the amorphous nature of how long the application process is allowed to take. Um, there's also an amorphous, oh, please revise this. Because if you don't have an end date that you've communicated for the recertification, you might not have a timeline on the cure. So I think that's part of the answer, but I'd be interested in what others are saying and if there's a practice that you found to be relatively helpful. It may be that you had a timeline in the past because this is not a new thing. This is a continuation of an old thing with certification applications, and those certifiers are simply whatever the timeline they had in the past, they're continuing to use.
Thank you. Then we have, did you state that some states are refusing to comply with the IFR?
Um, in layman's terms, yes. I don't know what the right legal term would be, and they may frame it differently, but that would be that's as a non-attorney, that would be my takeaway that they are thumbing their nose at the program in general. They are probably would be supportive of the direction of the IFR, but they don't even think there's a need for social and economic disadvantage that's too woke for them. And and uh, and if you read their language around it, I don't exaggerate. They kind of it reads the way you might expect from those that have a point of view that any of this is just nonsense and unnecessary and is radical, and we can finally get away from it. We should and want to do something that's completely different without looking at disadvantage at all. So small business would be okay, but anything related to disadvantage would not be something that they want to do. So I would think in the old days they'd be risking getting federal funds. I don't know if anything is at risk now. So that's again not very helpful for this webinar because I don't have any better information other than reading their communications. I don't know anything more than what anybody else on this webinar might.
Thanks, Dave.
Okay, should we move ahead? Or do you
Yes,
have another one?
we did actually have a comment on timelines. It said 60-day here at JTA. We start on 2/16 and go through 4/16. We hope to get the bulk of our firms during that time. Of course, we will extend as necessary.
Yeah, and that may be, it may be for some entities, they may have a window for the recertification process to be done. And to make that window work, when they want somebody to revise their application, they may give a shorter timeline, like weeks rather than a couple months.
Mhm. Yes, and we got another comment just now that said we're giving applicants 1 month if curative measures are needed. Um, Great.
Okay, one more slide on kind of successes and challenges of the state of the world. We just talked about this, the alignment among certifiers. So we've talked about that first bullet. Um, so are really seeing, and this is much more common, is we have delayed recertification versus quicker recertification. Like some haven't started and some are done. And so one of the concerns here is the damage to the DBEs and ACDBEs about not being able to return to contract goals in the home state if that is used, or being able to introduce an SPE program that you can't now because you don't have a DBE program plan and you can't submit the DBE program plan because you want your recertification to be complete. Um, you also have the issue of delaying participation of DBEs and ACDBEs from your home state, even if you don't have DB, you've never had DBE contract goals. So we talked to some states that have never had it, or not in this century have had DBE contract goals. So in their state, they still have some DBEs and ACDBEs. They may be participating in other states' programs. And so by delaying the recertification of those firms, you're delaying their participation in contract goals and meeting contract goals in other states. So that's one of the effects and kind of the not misalignment, but different timelines for compliance with the IFR. You may think, oh, we're a neutral state, we can go slow, that's fine, but you are putting DBs and ACDBEs at a disadvantage in being able to compete in other states. Okay, so what can we quantify? This is all very fuzzy, but we have seen some states where the applications got to 50% or more of the home state DBEs. So that's a how many applications do we have divided by how many home state DBEs did we start with on October 3rd? And I think there's some examples where you got to 50%. The more common when we talked to those that were familiar with certification, at the time we talked to them, it was more typically 10%. So a very, very small share of the DBEs and ACDBEs had applied. And that may be a function of we talked to them before they got, weeks ago, and maybe that's better now. I just wanted to point out in the IFR that in their footnotes and their calculations of some other impacts, they were working with a number of 90%. So nobody's at that. Any Q&A comments on this would be very helpful. This is, of course, by definition, fluid. But if you're at 10%, you're probably at the norm, but I don't know that you ought to feel good about that. If you're at 50%, you're doing better than most everybody else right now. There's not a lot doing much better than that. Just to let you know where you stand. I don't know I don't know if USDOT had any basis for the number of 90%, but they put it in the IFR. Not as a requirement, but as a footnote to a calculation. Any questions or comments here that we need to stop for, Nikki? And I'll keep going. You got a lot
Couple,
more, Graham.
yes, couple here.
Okay, jump
Let's
in.
see. Yes. Are there any ideas of how to approach a situation where we have an interstate business with a contract based in Florida, for example, and Florida is not reevaluating? Could we advise them to become certified in our state and our state becoming their JOC?
Local entities in Florida are recertifying, so they need to go to one of those entities. Don't go to FDOT. Would be
All
my
right.
answer.
All right. And then we had a couple. Oh, hold on. Thank you. Great. Then we had a couple from earlier. IFR allows for follow-up and identifies inconsistent application quality. Certifying agencies may experience increased numbers of intake inquiries and clarification requests as applicants navigate the new social disadvantage requirements or face inconsistent application quality. This would require certifying agencies to spend time following up with applicants and guiding them through the application as they go through the recertification process, which implicates certifying agencies' reliance interests. It's just a comment from earlier.
Good. We have a slide on that. I can
Yep.
skip over that slide.
Okay, and then one additional, are UCP accepting new applications even if reevaluation process has not been completed?
My understanding is that Oregon is taking new applications.
Okay.
And we're taking them, and I don't know the official status of the submission to USDOT that the reevaluation is complete, but my understanding is that at least some areas may be taking new applications before the reevaluation process is complete. Whether that's in line with the IFR or not, I'm not quite sure, but that's what's happening.
And then one additional, if your state implements a DBE conscious aspect to achieving their overall goals, should your agency develop a new triennial goal before updating their DBE program plan and submitting to USDOT agencies for review and approval?
We have a slide on that too.
Yes, we
The answer
do.
is yes. Okay, we'll keep going here. Thank you for all of those. What do DBEs have to say about this? Well, we did a survey to ask because we think that this is being left out. And we wanted to see how it was going for DBEs and ACDBEs. So 165 responded across 37 states. We have two parts of our webinar today where we're going to be talking about what DBEs told us. Some of it we could quantify, some of it we have quotes, and we're focusing on the recertification first. So, what type of help did you get? 40%-ish said no assistance, 34% said basically the same thing. We only got the written notification. About a quarter were really helped in our survey. And this is what they're telling us. This is their perception, not necessarily reality. But they said, okay, written guidance, workshops, other assistance. One had many, many, many webinars and workshops that they did throughout the state. And 1% said one-on-one assistance. So that is being delivered. It's being delivered only on occasion in a few states in terms of a certifier sponsored effort. So this is bad news. Three-quarters of those that responded said basically no assistance at all. How satisfied are you with this? 75% said that they were dissatisfied or didn't get any assistance at all. So not surprising that if you are hearing from DBEs that they are unhappy about all this, there's two reasons mainly. One is, okay, I have to recertify. That's a pain. I don't like the personal narrative. It's hard. It's upsetting. I'm not getting the guidance or help that I need. And then while I'm waiting, I'm really getting hammered in the state that they used to participate in DBE contract goals. So some of the information we heard, some of the quotes were, just please explain this. I've gotten no information. I need examples. I need help. Nobody knows anything. Can you just have talked to me? And then the process has been humiliating, we've heard that directly from DBEs outside of this process as well, as this is writing a personal narrative is upsetting. That means that that person is socially and economically at a disadvantage. In my mind, if it's painful to put together, then that may have been a real sign that there was social disadvantage, and it has continuing effects today. When we did our pilot program of helping people with personal narratives, many people were crying by the end, and we wanted to cry with them. We've actually heard from certifiers that their staff are very affected by looking at the personal narratives, but it's this impersonal process to do something very personal. And those two, I mean, it's certifiers aren't trying to be mean. this is just a bad setup. And those that are really kind of pouring their hearts out, and then they get a response, well, you use the word that you're a person of color or that you're female, we're rejecting it or we're sending it back to you when they just pour their heart out to you is really, really troubling. Or, you didn't tell us how humiliating enough this was. You need to quantify how quantify the effect on your business. This is just fraught with opportunity for bad feelings, hurt feelings, and people not wanting to do this, which is kind of what we're then seeing. So this is right from the voice of the DBEs here. Um, what type of help would you have wanted? I am almost half said, I really wanted help preparing my personal narrative. We've been telling entities this from the beginning. And we got some of the immediate response is we can't do this. And then that's simply wrong. That's the incorrect legal interpretation of anything. And that they're still asking for this help preparing my personal narrative. Please, we're going to send you all these slides. You'll have the video. Please use this to fight the good fight if you're arguing with those folks that say, oh, it's not legally allowable to help anybody with a personal narrative. That's simply not correct. There's certainly controls you want to have in place between somebody making a certification decision and somebody who might be helping somebody. But that's always been the case, and you would certainly be able to accommodate that. Some said, yeah, help preparing my personal net worth statement, but that's not new. They need to prepare that as well. It's always been difficult. It has not gotten any easier. It's the same. 16%, which that's all we heard in the old days, was the personal net worth statement is very, very hard to put together. I can give you my financials, but that's just difficult. Well, this scales it because only 16% are saying that, 44% are saying help preparing my personal narrative. And some of the comments would be, I'd really like help on that, samples, provide clearer guidance procedures. We heard a lot more, but that's kind of the gist of the different types of comments that we heard. Okay, and there's the slide that somebody else made the comment. You are allowed to do this. The IFR anticipates that you will be helping DBEs in the reevaluation process. Here's all the language out of it that Nikki just read from a part of the Q&A comment. So this is allowable. It was allowable in the past. It's allowable now. It was anticipated in the AFR. The fact that somebody has told you that you can't do it, please push back on that because that is help that people are begging for. And you would see your certification numbers go way up if you had some kind of mechanism for help in the personal narrative. All right, we're going to shift gears. This is probably the one part of the process that has us scratching our heads more than anything else. We knew the personal narratives were going to be difficult. We knew it would be difficult for the certifiers, for the DBEs. When we did the pilot program, we tried to figure out how you did that, and then we're advising people on what we found. We are very surprised that in black and white, it says in the AFR, you need to do a new overall DBE goal and a new DBE program plan as part of this IFR process. Think of it as three parts: reevaluation of the DBE certified firms, and overall DBE goal, part two, and new DBE program plan, part three. It's all a package. And you don't do the reevaluation and then you're done. You need to do all three. Probably half the people that we talk to around the country that was with responsibilities for this at one point or another have said, we don't need to do this. We can just do this later. We're focused on the reevaluation. We can't tell you more strongly that no, the IFR says to do all three, and then you can implement whatever you need to implement. But think of it this way, you can't know what your new DBE program plan is unless you know what you're shooting for. What is your goal? And do you need to have any DBE conscious components of that program plan? You don't know that until you've done the projection, and you can only do the projection if you've done the goal. So it's all three. We are very concerned that everybody's going to get the reevaluation done and then say, oh, yeah, we forgot about the DBE goal part. And then it takes you 3 months or 4 months or 5 months to get the DBE goal, overall DBE goal done. And then it's 2027. Let's talk more about this. Um, and your previously scheduled submission date, which I think is part of the source of the confusion, those may remain in place, but this is a one-time thing. You only have an IFR once, hopefully, and then you have your new DBE, overall DBE goals. You submit those. Your regularly scheduled date, you might submit the same goal if you don't have any better information. Maybe that's only 2 months apart, but you submit it twice. So you hit your submission date, but you do the new overall DB goal as soon as you can. And it actually says in the IFR that you need to do this quickly as practicable. Recipient progress, none, zero. Now, you can't fully do your new DBE goal until you have information from the recertification and the reevaluation. But you certainly can get started. And the same thing with, we've actually heard some people that have been working on their plans. So just like you might be changing the plan language, you should be thinking about how you're going to do the new overall DBE goal. And much of that work can start before the reevaluation is complete. All right. So I threw the slide in again, but made more things red. Just to reemphasize, as soon as practicable is three things: the reevaluation, submitting the new overall DB goal in DBE neutral projection. Anything left over would be DBE conscious. That's really what that term means in response to that previous question. It's whatever you think you need to do in addition to your neutral efforts, to your small business program efforts, or your outreach, or whatever you're going to get without any DBE contract goals is DBE neutral, and the rest of it is DBE conscious. And then you need a new DBE program plan that's based on your goal. We think that that can all be done within a month or 6 weeks after the reevaluation is complete, as long as you start soon, because there's a bunch of things that you can be doing now. And then when you get those three things in, you can continue to review new applications, restart counting DBE participation, restart DBE contract goals if that's what you need to do. So we hope we get questions on this if anybody's confused about it, but this is so important we had to show the slide twice. Here's what DBEs are saying about how they are affected, and this has everything to do with timing. And the more you have, if you were in a race conscious state, a DBE contract goal state, or a recipient doing DBE contract goals before the IFR, the more months you have without the DBE contract goals, the more serious the effect is on DBE. So this is the January snapshot. More than half, almost 57% said it's had a negative effect on my opportunities for work, whether it's subcontracting or concessions or whatever they happen to be doing. 57% in January said that was a negative effect. Another 17% said the only reason it isn't having an effect is I wasn't getting work on these projects anyway. So that's another way of saying that's another negative. Only 15% said, I'm doing fine. My firm wins work without the goals. Don't worry about me. Most, again, almost three quarters have some kind of negative answer to this. 57% said directly could point to a negative effect of not having goals in operation on those federally funded contracts in their state. And we heard more based on what they told us. They said no new DB contracts have been awarded since the IFR. My business has suffered tremendously. lost almost 40% of our staff, been abused by the prime contractors that had us on those contracts, which is not supposed to happen under the IFR, but it is. And then they quantified how much money they're losing. So the other thing that's been happening is some states have been holding these contracts and not letting them based on the hope that they can put them out with DBE contract goals once the reevaluation, the overall DBE goal has been submitted and the new DBE program plan has been submitted. So some of this is the work's being held back. There just isn't that work because some of these big projects have been stopped. Um, so that's what's working on. I really want to hear from you all. So in the Q&A, jump in here. And we titled this one, Time is the Enemy. And what are your options for accelerating the process? Pretty simple. Start it. Start the reevaluation, offer assistance, review applications as they receive. That's something that we were confused by. We heard a couple times is, well, we're going to get them all in and then we'll start looking at them. And we didn't think that that was a good idea, that as you were getting them in, you ought to be looking at them. You need to be very specific about when, without using the word deadline, about when the applications need to be in by and communicate it and remind people, and then coordinate among the certifiers so everybody gets done with the reevaluation at the same time, because you can't say that we're done with reevaluation until you have all the DBEs have the chance to become recertified. So I know that the last time I talked with the people in Florida, many were kind of carrying the burden, many certifiers in that state. When California is fully underway, you have the same issue there. Many certifiers are going to carry the burden. You don't want one to be way behind. You want to be able to shift some stuff around as needed so you're done with reevaluation at the same time and not waiting a couple months for one entity. That's our advice there. And then on the overall goals and program plans, we have, please talk to us more about this because we have a method of how to start now and to consider potential DBEs. But whatever you're going to do, plan it out now. So, and know what information you're going to be using so you can quickly finish that. There is a consultation process, and you want to know what you're going to do for that too. That's not that different than what you've had to do in the past. And we think you should be considering including potential DBEs in your new overall DBE goal, because if your DBE ranks are going to be reduced as low as much as what we are seeing, you're allowed to look at firms that appear that they could be qualified and interested in being certified as a DBE or ACDBE in calculating your goal. This is something that we've done many times in the past. It's been approved. We have a methodology for doing that. Others might be doing that. I don't know. But as far as I know, we're the only ones in process of doing this now. And this can be based on a recent disparity study or availability study if you have the data, or you could do a new availability study. These take a couple months to do, which is why you would want to do them now and have the information in. And where our methodology is counting somebody as a potential DBE is if you call them up, you explain what the DBE program is, and then ask them if they, based on that explanation, would they be qualified and interested in being certified as a DBE or as an ACDBE. The results that we have so far seems to be making sense and would lead to goals that would not be that much different than past approaches for entities that have based their overall DBE goal on both currently certified and potential DBEs. So we can answer more questions about this too. All right, this is very fast. I wanted to quickly go over what do you do while you're waiting, and here's some of the ideas. So ongoing, if you have an SBE contract goals program, good for you. There's not many that had been approved prior to the IFR around the country, so that's great. If you're don't have one in operation, you might be planning one, so that's planning ahead. This did not affect programs for non-federally funded contracts. Please explain to those that might be confused about that. that if you're operating a state or local program on your locally funded contracts, those have not been affected by the IFR. And we know that some agencies are holding back some contracts. And then all this planning ahead, including designing new SBE program, new overall DBE goals, new DBE program plan, and then some are accepting and reviewing applications for SBE certification. We just wanted to point that out. We're not necessarily advising that, but that is what's happening around the country. And I tried to get that through that quickly. And Nikki, back to you with Q&A. And Mara, what did I just cover that you might have some additional comments or suggestions on?
I think it was very succinct, thank you, and I would love to hear the questions. I think that might help just drill down a little more.
All right, fantastic. So yes, we've got some questions in the Q&A, but other folks, if you have any other comments or questions about things that we should have discussed or anything else, then please feel free to add those. We have a couple of reminders on the side there about how to use the function that will anonymize your responses and that the session's being recorded. So with that, let me start reading out a few of these questions that we've got in comments here. First comment, FDOT has submitted a waiver request letter to FHWA. They have asked for a waiver to move away from the DBE program and go 100% with the SBE. Right now, they're still waiting on a response back from FHWA.
That's great information to have.
Thank you. We have started our reevaluation, but we have heard from applicants that neighboring states have not, with most citing that they're waiting for more guidance from the federal government. Do you anticipate any more guidance from federal agencies in this process?
No. Mara, you have a different answer?
This is a requirement. I'm not understanding why people are on the fence on this. I think it's pretty clear what the mandate is, and I think folks need to essentially move forward. It's obvious. I don't know that there would be a non-compliance penalty because the program is so new, but I'd be surprised on both of these things, a waiver and permitting a DOT to just sit and wait.
Thank you. For the personal narrative, does it need to address all three areas or just one of those areas, education, employment, business?
It does not need to address all three areas. That was, I think in the FAQs, it was clear that you do not, there's no quantification of this in effect. Mara, did I get that right?
That's correct. I would advise that to the extent when people are thinking deeply about, obviously this is for the business owners, and if they can identify disadvantages in each category, it's better to be comprehensive than to pick one and have it not be successful.
Thank you. The first step of the DBE goal process is to determine a base figure for the relative availability of DBEs. We are a non-certifying entity, so we cannot consider potential DBEs. What steps can we take now?
You can consider potential DBEs, and we do it all the time. So call us. We'll discuss this offline. But anybody that is the recipient that does the goal. So everybody, a recipient isn't necessarily a certifier. In fact, in many cases is not. In most cases, is not a certifier. And the idea of setting a goal is you use the DBE directory as one resource, but it's not the only resource because you are allowed to look at firms in your community, in your market area, that could be DBE certified, but are not. And there's a long history of guidance from USDOT about this potential DBE idea. And it was not, there was nothing that was rescinded to my knowledge by the IFR. All that guidance, if you just think of DBE in a different way, is still good instructions from USDOT. And in fact, it was encouraged by USDOT that you take a look at this. We are very concerned that somebody had say a 12% goal is going to have a 2% goal in the future. And then there's so much about the program that just doesn't work if you're goals don't match the community. You're saying only 2% of you'd only expect 2% of the work to go to firms that would be disadvantaged, socially and economically disadvantaged. Well, still don't think that reflects reality. And the only reason you'd have your goal drop like that, and I use that just as hypotheticals, is because so many sort of socially and economically disadvantaged businesses that you used to have were shown a process that was so unworkable that they didn't reapply. It doesn't mean that they're not socially and economically disadvantaged. They just didn't apply. And there are so many more we know that could have been certified as DBEs prior to October 3rd that simply didn't apply, that were still could benefit for the program and would qualify for the program. And we demonstrated that through availability surveys, disparity studies, and other means. We know that to be true, and we are able to tell you what that gap is. There's usually the goals when you look at potential DBEs are double or more the goals that you would get under the old, pre-October 3rd if you just looked at DBEs alone. Now it's going to be many, many more times greater a goal, but still reflecting who's socially and economically disadvantaged in the community if you use the potential DBE route. We wouldn't be counting firms that had been denied certification, had applied and been denied certification. That's not in the definition of potential DBE. You don't use firms that have graduated out of the program or are really big. You don't count them as potential DBEs. Our methodology is you actually contact them and have them report to you that they are interested in it. This is all new. Most states have not gone through the certification process for new firms that would be newly going for DBE certification. And this would be able to reflect that to have a goal that really makes common sense, is explainable to the community, and not a drastic change from the community because really there's not that much in the program. The intent of the program hasn't drastically changed. It's how you get there that's changed. You no longer make a presumption of disadvantage based on one's race or gender. You have to make an individual showing of disadvantage. And but the disadvantaged business community, it hasn't changed in size. So the goal shouldn't be radically different than what you had before in our thinking. Of course, it depends on, research and what it actually shows. But if you haven't thought about the overall DBE goal, but you're seeing no applications come in or at a very slow pace, you think your DBE ranks are going to be really much lower than they were before. Now is the time to be working through how you're going to address that problem because it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy that if you if you drastically cut your goal as in what you resubmit, and you have a shell of a program, then nobody's want to get certified for it. So that is one way that in your state the program and its effectiveness is really diminished. Okay, that's enough of a speech. Mara, I don't know if there's anything you need to rehabilitate in what I just said, but
No, no, no,
I said it.
no, no. Yeah.
Great. I will read out next comment here. Establishing a goal is going to be easier than before because there is no need to meet the strict scrutiny standard, only to have a rational basis. The old methods and time spent establishing triennial goals or individual project goals likely won't be necessary. For example, I can look at my last few years of spending and come up with a goal.
Probably not. That's not the regulations of how you set a goal have really not changed. And looking at your last couple of years of spending is a step two adjustment, but it's not the way to get to a base figure. So I would be very pleased to talk with this individual after the webinar and explain more of our thinking here. But none of what you just said makes sense in terms of the two-part process of base figure. We actually have a slide on this that's important. I'm going to go to it. I don't think anything what you just said is in the approved ways of doing a base figure, which are DBE directory, Census Bureau data, bidders list, which will be very difficult because you don't know who was a DBE back. I mean, you have to use the current definition of a DBE from past data. Data from a disparity study must account for firm capacity. That is approved. And using a goal of somebody else never was a very good idea and isn't a better idea now. So we'd be interested in hearing your logic on this. Don't want to completely dismiss it, but I don't think that that's in line with these are right out of the regs as revised by the IFR.
Thanks, Dave. How do we go about setting goals if the recertification process has not started or is underway?
You cannot set DBE contract goals until the recertification reevaluation process is complete. You submitted your new overall DBE goal and you have a new DBE program plan. So you are stuck. And we go back to our favorite graphic. So you're at top of the as soon as practicable box, you're just stuck in your state until that the reevaluation is complete because you can be doing work on your new overall goal and you can be doing work on your new DBE program plan so you can submit them very quickly after that reevaluation is complete, but you are at the mercy of the reevaluation process in your state.
Thanks, Dave. And then last one we have currently, if race or sex is mentioned in a personal narrative, does it need to be returned to be revised, even if the basis of the disadvantage is not based on race or sex reference?
Mara, I'll let you take that one.
As I mentioned before, in my opinion, the answer is no, it does not have to be returned. It's the restriction on race and gender is regarding the decision. The decision maker cannot base its decision based on the race or gender of the individual. That was essentially the presumption in the past under this IFR is not permitted, but the individual referencing their lived experience and referencing their race, their ethnicity, their experience about that. Now, if the individual says, I think I've been disadvantaged, in my case, I think I'm disadvantaged because I'm a Latina, well, you ignore that. I don't think it needs to be returned for revision. You would ignore that in a decision. You wouldn't say, for instance, as a certifier, well, Ms. Rosales mentioned that she thought she was disadvantaged because she was born a Latina and, and she's also a woman. And so therefore she's disadvantaged. You would certainly not do that. That would not be permitted. But in my opinion, you would not need to return a statement like that. You would just ignore it and ensure that your decision is based on factors other than race and gender.
Thanks, Mara. Okay, so it looks like we don't have any additional questions or comments in the Q&A. We are getting to the end of the session here. So if anyone has any final questions or comments, please send those in. But in terms of our next steps following the webinar, Keen Independent will follow up with everyone. We'll send you an email with the YouTube link to this presentation. Please share it with your networks. And you can also keep up with us on LinkedIn and on our company website, where we will often post updates regarding the IFR. If there are no additional questions, then I will kick this back over to Dave and Mara for our final word.
We talked with many people in the webinar and leading up to this to try to figure out what was working or a challenge in your situation. So thank you for spending the time with us. I just wanted to tell you that we learn much more when we're talking with folks than we are conveying, and that continues to be the case throughout this IFR process. So we hope to be able to do this again in a bit of time and hopefully have better news on how all this is going or more promising news and be closer to the end and have that be more consistent across states. Mara, you get the last word.
I just also want to say thanks. All the questions I think were excellent. Just allows, someone like me to just refresh my understanding of and what I think my understanding is of this IFR. But the more questions, the better. We're all learning together. So thank you.
And maybe you don't get lost word. I just want to say, remember the time is the enemy slide? That's really true. And the DBE survey really drove that home. They're really hurting. Time is their enemy. And so they are hoping you move through this, give them as much help as you can, and hopefully they get through this as quickly as possible because they are not getting the opportunities in many cases that they got before. And it just shows the need for, even if it's a revised program, the new and improved or new and something DBE program can be helpful to them. They just need it in place, and it's really not in place for them right now.
All right. Well, thank you all very much for being here and for the questions and comments. And we will follow up with an email and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.